Hey,
Henry Coons. Finally.
I
What a
know. That's
what a
crazy.
fiasco.
Yeah.
Good to see you, my
Good to see
friend.
you.
Well, let's jump right into it. And we can hit on any of the more personal stuff at the end or even during the podcast. I have the great privilege of speaking with Henry Coons. Henry, what year did you come to Mowgli?
I came my Akela year, so that would have been 65.
65. And do
Yeah.
you how was it that you came to Mowgli?
Well, my dad went to Pasquani, which was down the road, and he wanted me to go there, but because I had younger brothers and my younger brothers were not old enough to go to Pasquani, he learned about Camp Mowgli, and in fact, they may have suggested Camp Mowgli, and so that's pretty much how it happened. And I do recall that I was living in Huntington, Long Island at the time, and my dad was living in the New York City. He drove out to meet us like he would on occasion, and we drove to New Haven where Mr. Hart was living, and I think we met Mr. Hart there just to kind of get an idea of the camp, and it just kind of went on from there.
Huh. And I mean the Coons family occupied a good portion of the camp for a few years there. Let's see. I'm trying. Obviously, I know Tim because I've visited him at his home several times, and
Yeah,
uh, and I've talked with your other brothers, and I'm trying to remember. We got Louis and
Michael,
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 right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It was myself, Timmy, Michael, and Louis. Yeah.
It was quite a clan. Did you all come at once, or was it over the a few years?
I know my brother Timmy and I came at the same time in 65. And I don't know whether the others kind of just melded in over time because the year after I graduated, I came back as an assistant in 68. I didn't come back in 69. Then I came back a few years later as a counselor and got some stories about that
Oh,
later on if
good,
you wish.
good. Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you remember of your first year? I mean, did your dorm mates and counselors who particularly stood out for you?
Um, Mr. Klein, Mr. Backus, Pop and Chocks. Obviously, Mr. Hart was a huge person in our lives at camp. He was a great leader. And, the waterfront staff was wonderful. I wasn't too much involved in things like riflery, but I did obviously like camping and tennis and a lot of the other activities that were offered.
Right. I remember that you were particularly a star at tennis. Did you? Was that true when you were in Akela?
Um, Not really. I hadn't really played a lot of tennis. Barry Beal was always my nemesis, and I think he grew up playing tennis. I wasn't, I always call myself a baseball player who likes to play tennis. And so I think he beat me to win the championship, probably our den year. He was a good athlete in tennis
Right,
and
right.
didn't have a lot of baseball there or football, things along those lines, or basketball. But the things that they did have were phenomenal. The hiking and the swimming and the boating and lots of great memories there.
Yeah. So who else was in your dorm that year that you recall?
Well, the young Hart, Jimmy Hart, Berking, Van Scoik,
Oh man, you had a great.
Punderson.
Huh.
It was they could do a comedy movie based on that particular group of people.
I
Uh,
think you're
I
right.
mean,
Of all the dorms that I remember, not necessarily just Aquila, but of that dorm grouping was the most interesting and iconic, and sometimes a bunch of rascals.
That's for sure. Yeah, we were the best when we were best, and we were worse when we were worse. We nothing horrible, and
Yeah.
but I thought it was a good group. I thought it was a congenial group, and we all had our strengths and our weaknesses, and we all pulled together when we had to, and obviously culminating with crew day and crew week, because in Den, it's half the guys are on the blue crew and the other half are on the red, racing crew. And so that was obviously a phenomenal experience as well.
Right. Do you remember anything of your trips or anything like that from your Akela year? Or
Um, we did Cardigan and we did camp, some of Bear Mountain was fun to do. And I think we did Bell Island. We did a trip over there. We did some trail clearing locally, some of the Mowgli trails. And that was kind of my first experience of going into the woods and going on the trails. And where we live today in Maine, we can actually see the whole presidential range within a mile from where we live. And
wow.
in the winter, I like to walk over there. It's about 2.5 miles there and 2.5 miles back, and just awe at the whole presidential range. And knowing that I did that as a kid, it's always a good feeling to look back and remember.
Huh. Nice. You mentioned Andy Poppinchock. I was talking with Andy, and he said that the first time he saw the presidential range was from a lobster boat off the coast of Maine.
Jeez.
He had never hiked in the mountains, or
Mm-hmm.
and then he became tripmaster eventually. But I think at your time, do you remember who was tripmaster? Was it one of the Boycourt brothers?
I thought Mr. Boycourt, Mr. Boycourt, from what I remember.
Yeah.
Pop
Um,
and Chalk may have been involved as well.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I looked at the the Washington squad picture yesterday, and I don't recall who the the counselors were.
Uh-huh.
But
Right. So, so, so did you take to hiking right away, or was it a gradual
no,
thing for you?
I liked it. I liked
Yeah.
it a lot.
Yeah.
Just and still do a lot hiking today. I mean, with COVID a couple of years, starting in 2020, you couldn't really interface with anybody. And where we live here, we've got miles and miles of snowmobile trails, and the snowmobilers are, nice enough to pat down the trails. And if you go out with cleats or snowshoes, you can do anything from a mile to 7 or 8 miles and just be on the trails and absolutely love it. So that's
Well,
something I think I started back, at Camp Mowgli. Didn't do
I,
a whole lot of hiking before I went to Mowgli.
I should ask where here is. Where are you living now?
We live in a little hamlet called Otisfield, Maine, between Harrison and Norway, Maine, off Route 117. And we bought the house in 2005. And while I was still working, we'd come up on vacations and part of the summer. And then in 2019, I retired, and we've been here ever since. And we've got 4 grandchildren and 3 of our own children. They love coming up here and enjoying the pond and some of the sights and the hiking. And so we're pretty well blessed. And I'm not too far from Mowgli, and I've been able to get over there a few times during the summer and enjoy, seeing, what's been going on there.
Right. Yeah, you've unfortunately I've missed you for various reasons, mostly because I had 2 bouts with COVID over this
Ugh,
last year and moved
wow.
from
Oh, okay.
where I was living near Waterville Valley up into the northern, more northern reaches of New Hampshire. Still not way north, but
You
uh,
said Bath, I believe.
yeah, Bath. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
So I'm right along the Connecticut River. I see bald eagles almost every day in the
Mm,
summertime, and
Nice.
It's really a very beautiful spot. I got lucky, a little Sears and Roebuck bungalow on the side
Cool.
of the Connecticut. Yeah, it's great. So,
Nice.
any shenanigans that you sort of recall from the earlier years or even up to then?
Not really too many shenanigans. I do remember there was like a costume contest one time where, Barry Beal was my girlfriend and he
Oh
dressed up as
yeah.
a young lady and I dressed up as a guy with I think I had one like sunglasses. One side of the sunglasses was clear and the other one was sunglasses. It was in the Hal, and I remember that, and I also remember some of the songs that we would sing in Greybrother's Hall, which was always a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
listening to Mr. Hart play the piano was always a fun thing to do. Things were very very simple back then. When you think there were no cell phones, and I guess we did have telephones back
Yeah.
then, but um, it was a good way to get away from the hustle and bustle of real life.
Yeah. I mean, we were so innocent. I think I think about, I was talking with Bruce Ferguson, who came some years later, but we were reminiscing about hot days when you were preparing for bed and all of a sudden the soak bugle blew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And 100 naked kids would run to the waterfront together.
Yeah. I always marveled at the clarity of Newfound Lake. I mean, that has to be one of the most pristine lakes in terms of clarity and just magnificent. And we live on a shallower pond. It gets warmer, but it doesn't have anywhere near the clarity of Newfound Lake. And going back there, that's the first thing I like to do is just go down to the lake and see the bottom and see how pristine it is.
Yes. And
Phenomenal.
yep. And over the years, they've done a good job of protecting that purity.
Great.
So,
Milfoil and some of those issues
yeah.
have been taken care of, hopefully.
Well, they have to uh, keep vigilant about it, but
Sure.
it's been successful to this point. Was the
Great.
waterfront a place where you spent a lot of your time, or?
Yeah. I always enjoyed, I got my white ribbon and I enjoy the people, down there and, on those hot days, swimming out to the raft and doing flips off the diving board. And, that was always great. And then if I had a chance to, rowboating or canoeing, and I enjoy that very much as well.
So, what other ribbons did you get besides your white?
Oh, geez. I got the red, which was for canoeing, I believe. I got the green for, I guess, camping,
Yep,
brown for something, yellow
hiking. Yeah.
for tennis, orange for axemanship. I think I had 8 or 9 altogether.
So you
Um,
must have been Greybrother.
I was Greybrother, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think my brother Timmy vowed that following year that he would be Greybrother because he thought he had to, catch up with his big brother, and actually he did. So that was a good thing.
Has there always been that competition between the two of you?
Oh yeah, a ton of competition, and he's a phenomenal musician. I think you did a
Yes, he is. Yeah.
a podcast with him, starting the Backstreet Boys and Matchbox 20 and some of the groups that he put together down in Florida. So that was his niche. When my dad gave him a guitar when he was 12 years old, he never looked back. And I never took up guitar. I took up tennis instead and golf, which I really enjoy.
But he's never been on the cover of Vogue magazine.
I've
Can
never
you?
been on the cover of that was a school publication.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
School publication.
Yeah, it's called the Avonian. Yeah,
No, no,
they
no. But what was the Vogue? The
Oh, that was just something. That was just a cover. That was just you can make those things up. It could have been Vogue, it could have been Look, it could have been Life magazine.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I bought it. I bought it. I saw it
You
on,
bought it.
the Google images, and I said, "Holy mackerel! What's he doing on the cover of that magazine?"
No, just a school magazine, and I think I mentioned it was a slow news cycle, so they had to get somebody, so they got me.
Well, they did quite a spread on you. I'll make sure that in the show notes that there's links to that because it really tells a lot about your life then. But let's finish your career as a camper, and then
Sure,
and then we'll get into the other stuff. But
sure.
in Panther, were there any trips? We'll talk about squads in a minute, but were there any
Mhm.
trips that were, particularly exciting to you that in your memory?
Well, I think it was in Panther. We did some canoe trips where we loaded up all the canoes and we went to the Pemigewasset Wilderness and did some of the streams and rivers there. That was different because I had never done anything like that before. Most of the trips are hiking, mountains and peaks and
Yeah,
views, but going into the wilderness and getting in a canoe and going down rivers and things along those lines. And with guys like Charlie Walbridge and
yeah,
Gaius Merwin, I mean, those were gods to us.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Merwin's like 6'2", 215, and Charlie Walbridge, 6'11", arms, 7'10", whatever he had. Yeah, I mean, these were like not freaks of nature, but supermen in our
Yeah,
own lives.
sure.
And we would just look at them in awe, and they would, cook us our meals and you know, throw the canoes, on their back and just, throw them in the water like a pumpkin. It just, we were astounded of their
Uh,
strength and their skill set for
yeah.
sure.
I also remember a very iconic photograph of you guys, your dorm, in sort of a probably what was a brief respite from a very rainy trip in the Pemigewasset Wilderness. Do
Mm-hmm.
you remember
Yep.
that photograph? I mean,
I
it's
do remember that. Uh, I felt like the American Army on Iwo Jima, after that battle with you know, a very similar feeling, not as dangerous,
yeah,
but I do remember being soaked and looking at Barry Beal. Barry Beal never liked to be uncomfortable. And, he looked very, and I'm sure I was uncomfortable too, but we sucked it up and we got through it. And you remember things like that, having to, go through tough things to, build your character.
yeah, yeah. So, were you obviously? I mean, it seems obvious to me that you were on a squad, but what were your
Yeah, I was
squad
on the Washington
experiences?
squad. There were five of us on the Washington squad and two counselors, and that was a phenomenal trip. Having an opportunity to stay at those huts, above the clouds, that was definitely a huge honor and a phenomenal experience. And since then, I have gone up Mount Washington maybe 3 or 4 times. One time with a guy named Billy Ray, who he and I played football in college together and baseball. And he was a counselor at Avon,
Yeah.
and not Avon, but Mowglis for one summer. And he was in the waterfront department. And I guess they didn't have someone to cover, the head of that. And he was head of it for that one year. I think this was summer of 1974.
Huh.
And
Wow.
he and I really enjoyed being together, and we're still very close friends today.
Now, so do you remember who else was on your Washington squad?
Yeah, Berking and uh, let's see, Shepherd, I believe. There's a picture in the
Yeah,
1967.
yeah,
Yeah, there were definitely five of us. I took a
yeah.
look at that early.
Well, I'll try and find that. Now, was that the summer that one or two kids after the Gopher Squad uh, got sent home for smoking in the hut?
I I vaguely remember that, but um,
But
obviously
yeah,
I wasn't involved in that. Thank
right,
goodness.
right.
Yeah, and yeah, I do recall that that was a pretty tough consequence. But I think
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
obviously they knew what the rules were, and that had to be made. And I know that Mr. Hart had to make tough decisions over the 3 years that I was there as a camper because uh, and I'm sure there were other kids that were disciplined during that time, but it was you knew the rules and you knew how to hopefully how to follow them.
Did you ever wind up on Mr. Hart's porch for disciplinary reasons?
Not that I recall,
Well,
and
I think you'd
no,
remember.
I would have remembered that because
Yeah, yeah.
I would have been pretty upset about that situation for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were a very popular guy and exceedingly competent, and everybody knew that you were a leader among the campers. And so as you moved into Den, did you feel that burden upon yourself to be a leader among the kids?
A little bit, having my younger brothers there, obviously I wanted to, be a good role model for them. And I think the fact that you are in Den and that level is, way above being any other camper. I mean, I think all the
Yeah,
younger kids looked up to the Denites and we understood that we had to be role models for them.
yeah,
And so that was a good experience, having to be a role model for the younger kids
yeah, yeah.
and and try to model good behavior and accomplish things that they would in turn want to aspire to, once they became, Denites.
Talk about your crew experience.
Um, I was on the Red Crew, and I think in Akela, I might have been on this, second or third form. I think I was on the first form as a Pantherite, and my brother, who was younger, was on the racing crew as a younger guy because he was a coxswain. And then my senior, my Denite year, I was the bow on the red racing crew, and my brother Timmy was the coxswain. And in the blue boat, Barry Beal was on the racing crew, and his younger brother was the coxswain. And I don't think in Mowgli history there was ever, the red racing crew and the blue racing crew. You had both brothers, one a coxswain and one a rower,
Yeah.
on the on the same, same in the same boats.
Oh, that's very
And
interesting. That's haven't
yeah,
heard that one.
and I winning that race really made an impact on me. I mean, I know that you try your best, and if you didn't win, that at least you tried your best. But winning that really gave me a lot of confidence to do things in the future in my life. And it was a close race. I think we won by a half a length or something like that. But that was a real marker in terms of gaining confidence in my abilities and understanding the true value of teamwork, because you can have five guys going perfectly and that sixth guy catching water, and that's pretty much the end of the race. And so teamwork, confidence, things along those lines, um, really made an impact, heading into, at that point I was ninth grade, 10th grade. And that's a critical time in your life. Tons of changes, going, you know, at that particular point in your existence.
Right.
But Mowgli kind of gave me that confidence to move forward with athletics, academics, and things along those lines.
Now, was Andy Poppinchock the crew leader that year for the Reds? Do you remember?
I believe I believe he was. I believe
Yeah.
he was. I can't confirm that, but I
I,
think
I
that.
I can remember at least one, maybe even 2 years when Paul was the crew leader for the Blues and Andy was the crew leader for the Reds, but I don't remember
Mhm.
what years that would have been. Your
Yeah,
den year was
67.
1967.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then so you guys, your red racing crew won, and then I was on the red racing crew in 68 and 69, and we lost both those races.
Oh, but you
uh,
tried your hardest.
yeah, well, I think you learn just as much from
You do.
losing as you do from winning.
You
It's
do.
just different kinds of lessons. and
Correct.
and you were obviously close friends with Barry Beal, so you must have had some sense after the race of his disappointment.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
crew is it's kind of a microcosm, isn't it, for life?
Oh, it really is. And the fact that, that race went back, years and years and years back to what, 1912 maybe, or
Mm-hmm.
whenever the camp was founded. And the fact that those boats were decades and decades and decades old, and very unique, a very, very unique experience for sure.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
traditions that Mowgli has is just phenomenal.
Now, how was it uh, when you moved into being on the staff as an
Mhm.
aide and then a senior staff member? Uh, what was the difference in the experience for you?
Well, again, you still had to be a role model, and you had to, you had certain tasks that you had to accomplish, and kids being kids, when you had duties, hours, they had duty, during that morning period, and making sure that things were put in good order, things along those lines. Making sure if I think I did some tennis and I did some other activities, that was part of my responsibility, and teaching them in a way that they had an opportunity to enjoy the game and improve over time. Those were very important for me. And then the other difference is, as a staff member, you get to see behind the scenes in terms of some of the things that go on in camp. And the thing that always was remarkable to me was, the kitchen staff and Smitty and his small crew of people, feeding, you know, 75, 80 campers plus staff plus families. Was just remarkable how they were able to do that day after day after day, 7 days a week. And so, as a staff member, you kind of get a glimpse of what it takes to run a camp and some of the things that have to be done. And I don't know how they did it all in time that they had to do it in.
What when you were an aide, did you work in the kitchen?
I'm sure I had a stint in the kitchen in
Yeah,
the dishwashing uh, area, which was fine.
yeah. Did
Um,
you get to know Smitty at all?
I did, I did, and again, he was a remarkable individual, and people loved him not only for his cooking, but just his spirit and his just very gentle nature, and just a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Yeah, yeah. He he had quite a sense of humor, Smitty did.
Yeah, yeah.
But he and Mrs. Hart were always at odds because, as you may recall, Smitty was a smoker,
Yes.
and he would light one cigarette from the end of the other, and And if the ashes fell in the food, well, he just stir it in.
Yeah, Mrs. Hart was quite a character herself.
Yeah. Did you have any run-ins with her? Most of us
No,
have.
no run-ins, no
Yeah.
run-ins.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I think she and Bill had a great relationship over time, and um, yeah, wonderful lady.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Mr. Hart was kind of uh, the the uh,
Calming influence.
epitome of a camp director, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, and for him to sit on that council rock at campfire, I don't know how he did that. I think that's probably the most uncomfortable way to sit on a rock for an hour or so. I don't,
Yeah.
that would not have been. And do the camp directors still sit on that rock during campfire?
As far as
Do you
I
know?
know, they do, but uh,
I wouldn't think that's
I'm
very
not certain
comfortable.
of that. Maybe Nick has a pad there now. Who knows? Yeah,
I would
it
have a
wouldn't.
patch for sure. Oh my God.
But I always remember, the first campfire of the season when Mr. Hart would read from the first chapter of the Jungle Book,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and he had these unique voices for all the
Characters.
different characters, and
Yeah.
so it would make it so interesting and fun. I think it really fired our imaginations for the story itself.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, I still say that's my favorite book of all time. So,
Well, Rudyard Kipling is one of my favorite authors.
yeah,
And I know that one of the things I did when I was a teacher was we had an English teacher, and he said, one of the things you got to do in life is you have to memorize some poetry. And I memorized A Legend of Truth by Rudyard Kipling. And I still, love that poem today. And, the fact that he wrote the Jungle Book and the characters, and, Disney came out with things, and the fact that a small little camp in the middle of New Hampshire had an opportunity to, use that as a guide for young kids has
right.
has always been a phenomenal thing to
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. It's do you find that I mean kids develop, I think a lot of the kids anyway, develop a
Mm-hmm.
huge sense of confidence in their abilities to tackle problems and to achieve things as a result of being at Mowgli, but they don't tend to really realize that until they're well into their adult life.
I think I realized it fairly quickly.
Uh-huh.
To take an axe and work for your orange ribbon, sharpening axes. I mean, those are dangerous tools, and
Right.
for them to give you the opportunity to do something like that and chop down trees and be measured for that type of experience was wonderful.
Yeah.
And
And
hiking up mountains that you never an opportunity. Some of the some of those heights were you know pretty amazing.
yeah.
Chakarwa, the last couple of 100 yards are pretty much almost vertical,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
don't ever forget that.
Right. Right. And every single industry had a chart. They call it the
Yes.
Mowgli report, but it
Yeah.
was a chart that boys could follow to see
Hmm.
what they had yet to achieve and what they had achieved. And I
Right.
I think that really speaks to the educational importance of the experience.
And also the duties that you had to do. They had sort of a revolving chart
Oh
So you
yeah,
didn't do the
right.
same duty every day. You could might maybe be a waiter at your table, and then you're, doing a sweeping chore, or you're cleaning out X, Y, or Z.
Yep.
And I like the Democrat, and it was fair.
Yeah.
You didn't always have the worst job. You didn't always have the best job, but
Yep.
you felt pride in getting the job done and having an opportunity to try different things.
Right. Exactly. So, what did you do during that summer that you took off after you were junior staff?
That was 1969.
Ah, a
That was the
turbulent,
summer of
turbulent
love,
era. Yep.
Woodstock.
Yeah.
I was 16 years old. I was living in Huntington, Long Island. Um, my stepfather and mother had just won the New York State lottery,
Wow.
and my stepfather had roots in Miami. His father was a developer down there back in the 30s and 40s. And so um, they were down in Florida looking for property. And I was 16 years old in Huntington, Long Island, just got my driver's license. And I pretty much had the house to myself for about, I don't know, a month. So I was working at a grocery store in the produce department, and had my license. I played American Legion baseball. Had a great time doing that, and so that was a fun summer for me.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Talk about freedom.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had to take care of the house, and we had one of these pools that are above ground, so I had to make sure that was kept clean, and I didn't have any wild parties or things along those lines. I learned at an early age that you don't want to drink and drive, because I had a friend who was in a bad accident and didn't want to get involved in that. But baseball, during that summer, and hanging out with my friends was a lot different than the previous 4 summers at an all boys camp up in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was a good experience.
But then you decided to come back as a senior staff member.
Yeah, I did.
What
Mm-hmm.
what was the impetus for doing that after you had sort of experienced the freedom of those other summers?
I just love the experience. I
Yeah.
thought it was just a great way to spend your summer.
Yeah.
And the one summer I really enjoyed was when my football buddy in college, Billy Ray, it was 1974. I talked him into doing it, and we would lift in the counselors area in Greybrother's.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And in the morning, we'd get up before, the bugle, and we'd run down to Camp Onaway and back as just sort of a way to, get ready for football in the fall.
Yeah.
And he had a great personality. He was on the waterfront, and so that was a good experience. Having him there, and then interacting with all the kids and teaching them tennis, and just having a great time. I mean, the 8 weeks that you're there just fly by. It seems like it's like 3 weeks,
Right. Right.
and it's just it's over before you know it, unfortunately.
Right. So tell the folks from Mowgli where you went to college. I remember because I'll never forget you and your shirt.
I went to Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania. One of the things I wanted to do in college is I wanted to play two sports. I wanted to play football and baseball. And to go to a larger school, number one, I might not even be able to play one of those sports. But going to a Division III school with 2,400 students, that was a perfect place for me to go. And I played 4 years of football, 4 years of baseball. Had a great time with that. Majored in history. Was a member of Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity, which I enjoyed a lot. And I just enjoyed being in Pennsylvania. There was a farmers market right down the street where all the Amish on Friday and Saturday would bring all their goods, their produce, their great meets, and we'd go down there and have a good time, buying some stuff. And then high school football was big there too, and there were stadiums on Friday night. We'd enjoy that. So my 4 years at Muhlenberg were great. And during spring break, I'd pop down to Florida and get a job down there for a couple of weeks, and then pop back to Allentown and start baseball season.
Now, as I recall from reading the profile in Avon's magazine, you were a quarterback for the football team and a pitcher for the baseball team.
At
Is that
Avon,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. I was captain of the team in 1970.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Baseball and football, and enjoyed that. We had a good team. We had a great coach. Tragically, a year later, when I got into college, he died at age 42, and that was one of the real tragedies in my experience. Losing a guy who was almost like my father for
Right.
2 or 3 years as the football coach. Dying at
Wow.
42.
Yikes.
It was nice that his son Peter Rice became a teacher at Avon Old Farms, and he and I are still close. And so, his father's legacy, carried on through his son.
Now, did you at Muhlenberg? Did you also play those same positions in the sports, or did you do
No,
something different?
I played defensive halfback and wide receiver in football, and in baseball, I played center field and right field for 4 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
enjoyed that.
Well,
Our football team won the championship my junior year, and we beat Widener College that had a running back by the name of Billy White Shoes Johnson, who went on to the NFL,
right.
and I had to cover him man to man. We
Wow.
beat them. I gave him like a 35, 40-yard cushion. He was just so fast, but fortunately we won that game,
Wow.
and that was definitely one of the highlights of my college experience.
I'll bet. And I'm probably not a problem with baseball, but have you paid the price for football over the years in terms of your body?
I had a slight injury my junior year. I think I had a knee thing that was only lasted for 2 weeks, and I'm just knock on wood. I've just been very blessed that I haven't had any serious health issues or physical issues. God gave me good ankles, good knees, good I tore a rotator cuff, and the doctor said I needed surgery. And my wife said, you're not going to do surgery, you're going to do rehab. And it's been fine. So,
Oh, wow.
again, I've been blessed and lucky. And,
I guess.
I try to, you know, prevent things from happening by some doing stuff before I go out and play.
Well, I too pitched and played quarterback at Northfield Mount Herman, and but my team was not worthy of those accolades. I used to say they threw lookout blocks, which means they missed their
Look at,
block and yelled at me to look out.
yeah, I
But
hear you.
I never knew when to whether I should blame my bad knees on that or on years of carrying a heavy pack up and down the mountains and with Mowglis.
Mm-hmm.
So I had both my knees replaced, but boy, I
Oh
feel
my God.
I
Uh,
feel really blessed that it worked well, and I'm now able to hike and
uh,
walk with comfort. So,
Good.
yep.
Did you have them both done at the same time?
I did because, and I'll tell you why. Because I said to my doctor, I'm enough of a chicken that that if I don't do them both at once, I might not come back for the second one after rehab.
No,
So
that's what you say. If you have one done, you'll never get the other one done. You've got to have them both done, and
yeah,
that's good for you.
yeah, it's a tough rehab, but
Oh my God, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So okay, so after Muhlenberg,
Hmm.
what'd you do?
I worked as a security guard in New York City for about 2 weeks in near Harlem, and I would have done that for most of the summer, but my grandmother had a connection at B. department store, and so I got a job selling men's suits at B. department store, and so I did that for a pretty good chunk of the summer. And then I had an opportunity to go out to the Hamptons and be sort of an assistant tennis guy at a club that had 8 or 9 hard true courts, and I enjoyed that. I would live out in the Hamptons. My dad and my stepmother had a house out there, and they'd come out on weekends. So that was a fun time for me to play a lot of tennis and get to know some people out there and play a little bit of golf. And that was a fun summer. That was the summer of 1975,
Uh-huh.
which was great.
And then when did you
And
join
Avon Old
the
Farms.
Avon Old Farms faculty staff?
I went back for my 5th reunion, and I was watching a baseball game, and I went up to the headmaster and I asked him um, if he needed anyone to teach a little history and coach a little football. And he said, "Come to my office tonight and sign a contract." So that was pretty much it.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I mean, the diversity of your experience and talent certainly must have made you a great candidate for them. He was probably pretty excited, obviously.
well, one of the things that happened was the person whose job I took was in a water polo accident. Someone had gouged his eye, and so he couldn't really come back and teach. And so, I was kind of in the right spot at the right time. And I had, asked the headmaster a year before, and there was nothing open at that time. But he tried to encourage me by saying that if something does open up, you'll be the first one on the list. But at the time when I went back, the injury to the other person and the fact that I was there at that particular time just kind of worked out. So, and I figured I'd be there for a year or two, and it was 43 years later that I stepped down from that.
But
Yeah.
you went from faculty and coach into the administration. I mean,
Yes. Yeah. And in 2000, they wanted me to go into sort of the fundraising and the friend raising, and I still got to coach tennis, which I enjoyed. But I got to travel around the United States and increase the endowment, which is very important for scholarships, but also to upgrade some of the facilities. And during between 2002 and 2019, I think we did over 45-50 million dollars worth of upgraded facilities and
wow.
programs and scholarships and things along those lines. And obviously, I got lucky with a couple of people who I got under the umbrella, guys who had graduated in the 1950s and kind of felt out of touch, and to re-engage with them and try to get them excited about this little boys schools in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by 2 girls schools, which was good. um, it worked out. And today we've got a phenomenal headmaster who had actually been there since 1992, but he became headmaster in 2019. And 400 boys. And the interesting thing about Avon, it was founded by a woman, Theodore Pope Riddle, who survived the Lusitania. Her story is fascinating. And
Huh.
the fact that Mowgli was founded by Elizabeth Holt,
Yeah.
forgot her last name.
Elizabeth Ford Holt.
Elizabeth Ford Holt. Yeah, I
Yep.
mean, both those women are phenomenally, and to think that an all boys camp and an all boys school was founded by 2 very strong, willing women, back at the turn of the century, has always been something I feel very much blessed about.
Yeah.
And I would love to see a PBS, miniseries about, Mrs. Holt and Theodate Pope Riddle. She was a leading
Oh,
architect of her time. Her father was a railroad magnate, so she had some money in the bank, but she also had tremendous talent and willpower. And
yeah.
she survived the Lusitania, fortunately,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was an indestructible school for boys.
Oh, it's an interesting idea. There's no doubt about it that they both were women who were liberated before their time, uh,
Yeah.
and visionary.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Did she did she, did she purchase the property and then
Yeah.
start the
Um,
school?
3,000 acres of land outside of Hartford in the Farmington Valley. She bought for her father what is currently known as the Hillstead. And it's a beautiful museum that has Monet and Manet. And I mean, the art collection that she has in Farmington and at the Hillstead is phenomenal.
Wow.
And we still have like 1,500 acres of the original 3,000. About 1,000 of those acres were turned into some wonderful, homes for people in the area. These very
Yeah.
large homes near polo fields and things along those lines. Um,
Huh.
but she hired over 600 people, mostly from Poland and England, and built a Cotswold village. So it's a very unique architecture that she built, in the 1920s.
Right. Yeah, I remember going there several times when I was in high
Oh,
school at
Northfield,
Northfield
yeah,
Mount Hermon.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
We,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't remember for what sport it was. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Might have been football. I'm not sure. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so ultimately you became the development director. Is that the correct title?
I wasn't the development director. I was director of alumni, which was sort of a subset
Okay.
of
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
And
Direct.
again, I involved annual fund. It involved, visiting, having to go down to Florida and playing tennis and a little bit of golf and, trying to get some support for a project or a scholarship or things along those lines. Yeah, I
Yeah.
enjoyed that part a lot, actually.
Right.
So it
But it's
wasn't really like
also
work. It was,
but it's a huge responsibility in terms of the ongoing health of Avon Old Farms, just as it is
oh, sure.
for Mowgli. I mean, that's what I think has
Yeah.
put Mowgli back into a status of being full.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I talked to somebody yesterday who said, well, that was you, I guess, that your son is on the waiting list for one of the
My
dorms.
grandson, Nico, is on the
Grandson,
waiting
sorry.
list.
Yeah, your grandson is on the waiting list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But I got
uh,
to meet Tomo Nishido. He's head of the board of directors.
right.
He's phenomenal. I only got to meet him once, and I could tell right away. I mean, he's a leader,
Oh yeah,
and and Robbins is just. I think he's the right guy at the right time for
absolutely.
Mowgli. So I think the leadership is great, and it's always nice if you have. I know at Avon we had two or three guys that you could always just count on to, make things happen,
Right.
and hopefully the Mowgli has a couple of families or people who can make a difference as well.
Yeah. So you've over the course of your life, I know you're still a youngster, but the uh, uh, the grand arc of your life, you've had several institutions uh, that have played a significant role in your life. How do you, uh, looking at the arc of your life, where do you see Mowgli's place in that? How do you view your experience at Mowgli in terms of the person that you became?
Well, a lot of it had to do with just enjoying the outdoors. I mean, today a lot of kids are put into these sports camps where you focus on soccer or lacrosse or hockey, and it's a one-dimensional thing. Um, because a lot of parents want their kids to, get scholarships to, play some of those sports. Um, I think one of the reasons I was able to be successful in what I did was I was never burned out um, from a whole summer of just playing baseball or football or whatever you would do. And the experience of just being in nature, something that I would not have had an opportunity to do. I think that was critical to, my development over time, and just the friendships that you develop at a place like Mowgli, just enjoying some marshmallows over an open fire, or
Yeah.
fooling around a little bit in the dormitories and things along those lines, and swimming races, and obviously crew day and the whole excitement leading up to that. um, I guess
Yeah.
that's how I would answer that.
Well, Henry, you described Gaius Merwin and Charlie Walbridge from the perspective of a kid. A lot of people saw you that way as well when you were on the staff at Mowgli, and frankly, when you were a camper, you were seen as a leader who was a little bit larger than life. And I just want to say that the part you've played at Mowgli has been a significant one, even though it's only for short bursts of time during the course of a year or and over your life. And I'm just so glad to call you my friend and to uh, my Mowgli brother. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me, and for all that you've done for Mowgli and all you will do in the future.
Well, I appreciate the interview and great talking to you. And you're pretty much due west from where I live, and hopefully this summer, if Nico gets off the waiting list, I'll pop over, and I'll probably pop over anyway. 2 years ago, I had an opportunity to help with the opening, doing some of the work,
Yeah.
getting some of the things together into the dormitories. This Tommy Greenwald, he's unbelievable in terms of what he knows about the camp and how he puts things together, and his whole effort. I think Nick is very lucky to have, someone like him under his umbrella
You bet.
to get a ton of stuff done that needs to get done, during that time of year. And I'm sure at the end of the season, the reversal of, putting the camp to bed is also, a big task as well.
Yeah. Henry, thank you very much and good hunting, my brother.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Take
Take
care.
care, Wayne.